Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you are new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So David Haye has done an interview with Sky Sports and he's been talking about the potential fight between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Of course, this week we learned that contracts have been signed. Now we're waiting on a date and a venue. But David Haye has been having his say on this fight, and he is saying that if Tyson Fury essentially plays the aggressor in this fight, Joshua knocks him out early on. David Haye said the following: Tyson Fury is on such a high. The victory over Wilder made him look like $1 million. His confidence will be sky high, and I genuinely think Fury and his team don't rate AJ as highly as they should do. That in itself causes potential issues. If Tyson Fury attacks Anthony Joshua in the same manner in which he did in Vegas against Deontay Wilder, I don't believe it works in his favour. I believe he'll be too open, too wide, and somebody as fast, athletic and as skillful as Anthony Joshua will be able to punch right through the middle and take him out early. I know it's a controversial prediction. Those are the words of David Haye in regards to Tyson Fury's tactics in this potential Anthony Joshua fight. And I wanted to share my 2 cents on this kind of theory, I guess. Now, listen, Tyson Fury being the aggressor in this fight, especially from the opening bell, I'm not saying that it cannot work in this fight. Of course it could work, but for me, that style would be a lot more risky against someone like Anthony Joshua than it was against Deontay Wilder. And I believe that style in which he fought Wilder with would give Joshua more of a chance in this potential fight. Of course, Deontay Wilder in his own right is a very dangerous heavyweight. He's extremely flawed, but he is dangerous. The thing is though with Deontay Wilder, as dangerous as he is, he's only really dangerous with one shot, and that is the straight right hand when he's got some distance. If you close that distance, get on his chest, Wilder doesn't really have much coming back. He's not great at shortening his punches, he's not great on the inside, and even from the outside or mid-range, his left hand is not developed at all. Deontay's jab is quite mediocre, and his left hook to me is a pretty poor shot. Deontay Wilder, his MO is to land that straight right hand, and once Fury took that away from him, he really had nothing left, and Tyson did what he wanted to Deontay Wilder on that night. Anthony Joshua, again, he's not a perfect fighter, but offensively, he is far more put together than Deontay Wilder in a lot of ways. First and foremost, Joshua is a much better combination puncher than Deontay Wilder. He's got a greater variety of punches than Deontay Wilder. His punch technique in general is better than Deontay Wilder. I believe he's actually got better timing than Deontay Wilder. And Anthony Joshua is far more effective at mid-range than Deontay Wilder, and a lot more capable on the inside than Deontay Wilder. So while Joshua does have his own flaws, and while Deontay Wilder holds certain advantages over him, Joshua to me is a much more put together offensive fighter than Deontay Wilder. And for me, Tyson Fury being the aggressor against a guy like Joshua is much more risky, just because there's much more variety with Joshua's work in comparison to Wilder, and he's more comfortable on the inside, and he's much better at mid-range. And ultimately, he brings a lot more to the table for Tyson Fury to worry about. If you look at that second Deontay Wilder fight, Tyson did a great job of applying the pressure. He maintained a consistent work rate. He really was bullying Deontay Wilder physically, and also his feint game in that fight was top notch. He was making Wilder bite off every single feint, and he got it right that night against Deontay. But at the same time, it wasn't like Tyson Fury wasn't making some defensive mistakes in there. There was a lot of times when Tyson was basically just walking Wilder down, coming in square on, to be honest with you, kind of squared up. When he was unloading with his hooks on Wilder, he kind of squared up his body, and when he was throwing those hooks, they were quite wide, and Wilder just never had the tools to try and exploit that. I think Joshua has a lot more tools to exploit an offensive Tyson Fury. Like I say, Joshua is actually pretty good at shortening up his punches. He's got a real nice short right hand. The uppercuts, of course, up close are very good. His left hook is pretty decent as well. For me, Tyson Fury fighting that fight against Joshua is extremely risky. Tyson Fury can definitely apply pressure, as we've seen in his career, in the Wilder fight, the second fight, and even the Otto Wallin fight to a lesser degree. Tyson Fury can apply pressure, but I don't think he's an elite pressure fighter in the heavyweight division. I still think Tyson Fury's strengths lie in his boxing from the outside. The movement, the feints, the stutter steps, the double jab, the turning of his opponents. That's where I think Tyson Fury is at his best and at his most comfortable. And I believe that style against Anthony Joshua would give him a far better chance of him getting the win in this fight. If I knew Tyson Fury would approach this fight with that style, I would pick Tyson Fury confidently, because we saw signs in the Joseph Parker fight. Parker in that fight was quite negative and he was kind of backpedaling and being elusive. Anthony Joshua looked quite ordinary. He wasn't comfortable cutting the ring off, taking the lead, taking the initiative. He looked pretty ordinary in that fight. Even when you look at the Klitschko fight, ignore the rounds where all of the excitement happened. Look at the rounds where much wasn't happening. They was both kind of standing off each other, but it was Vladimir Klitschko who was winning the battle of lead hand control. He was taking centre of the ring and, in my opinion, was boxing more effectively. He was making Joshua bite on the feints, and Joshua really did not look comfortable when it came to boxing with Vladimir Klitschko. When it turned into a slugfest, that's where Joshua had his moments and ultimately won the fight. But in the boxing match in that fight, I felt Joshua was second best. And even against Parker, a super negative guy, Joshua really did not look comfortable taking the initiative. If Tyson Fury fights in a similar style to how he did Klitschko back in the day, or even the first Wilder fight with more fitness, I think that style is horrible for Anthony Joshua. People have this impression now that Tyson Fury's a pressure fighter. I don't see it, man. I think that style is far too risky for Tyson. The guy's been hurt. He's been hurt by non-punchers at heavyweight. I get he's improved a lot over the years, but your chin doesn't. He's been dropped by Steve Cunningham. He's been dropped by Nevin Pakic. He got badly hurt by Nikolai Furfer. Obviously, the first Wilder fight. Tyson Fury's chin isn't the greatest. It's a decent chin, but he can definitely be hurt. He can definitely be dropped, so he can certainly be knocked out. And, Tyson Fury on the front foot, while he's effective against certain opponents, I think he makes certain mistakes that certain guys would exploit. And an explosive combination puncher with good timing and good counter punches like Joshua, maybe he could be that guy who exposes that style in Tyson Fury. So for me, David Haye saying that Joshua could knock him out early if Tyson applies pressure, I don't think it's far-fetched. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying that Tyson Fury's pressure game wouldn't work in this fight. But I'm just saying I believe it's more risky. If Tyson Fury wants to apply pressure, I think he should do it later on in this fight, after boxing for the first few rounds, frustrating Joshua, waiting for his gas tank to decrease, and then as this fight goes on, once you're starting to feel more comfortable that Joshua's fading, then apply the pressure. But I think Tyson Fury applying pressure from round one could be risky. It could be risky for me. Listen, Tyson Fury's a great fighter, but there's this impression out there that he cannot be beaten, that he's got no flaws, etc., etc. Of course he's got flaws, of course he can be beaten. If you've got no flaws, you're not going to be going life and death with Otto Wallin, who at the time, and even now, is not a top 10 heavyweight. So, yeah, I think this fight's very interesting from a tactical point of view. I wonder how Tyson Fury approaches it. That, to me, is the main factor of this fight. I think this fight lies with Tyson Fury, and it will be won or lost by Tyson Fury, depending on what tactics he implements in this fight. If he boxes, I would be pretty confident that he wins this fight. Of course, Joshua is always going to have a puncher's chance. He's explosive. He can crack. Joshua's always got a puncher's chance, even against the boxer Fury. But I would take the boxer Fury to beat Joshua confidently. The pressure fighter Fury, though, I'm not entirely convinced. Tyson Fury is an elite level pressure fighter in the heavyweight division. He makes a lot of mistakes when he pressure fights. Slappy hooks, poor punch technique at times. Sometimes he'll come in straight lines I don't think Tyson Fury is a natural pressure fighter. He can do it. He can do it relatively effectively, but can he do it against someone like Joshua? Again, I'm not sure. But yeah, I find David Haye's comments interesting. I partly agree with them. I'm just not saying Tyson Fury definitely loses if he fights in that style. I'm just saying it's more risky. And I know people might say, well, what does David Haye know? He got the Wilder fight wrong. Well, if you're sitting there saying you've never got a prediction wrong, then you can say that. But listen, man, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. But yeah, share your thoughts below. What do you make of this? Peace.